afternoon to everyone joining us from wherever you are in the world. It is a pleasure to have you with us for this webinar, where we will present the course, Adequate Food, the Human Right of Us All. My name is Nicholas Lazarus, and I am a young professional officer based at the FAO's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, our goal is to give you an overview of the free and self-paced course, Adequate Food, the Human Right of Us All, which also provides a certificate upon completion. This course delves into the core concepts and content of the human right to adequate food. Now, what is this right and why is it important? And what role do we play in upholding this right? Also, to what extent is this right being upheld in the Caribbean? Today, our distinguished speakers will address these questions by sharing their knowledge and experience. We hope their insights will inspire you to enroll in this online course, which offers a deeper understanding of this crucial area. We are transmitting this event through FAO's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean's website and YouTube channel. Please follow us on FAO's Americas website and its X, formerly Twitter account at FAO Americas, using the hashtags FAO Online Conference, Human Rights, Right to Adequate Food, Food Security, Food Nutrition, and Better Nutrition. We are also eager to receive your comments on both the YouTube and X platforms. Now, I would like to introduce our panel, which is comprised of colleagues from the FAO and representatives of international organizations, governments, and civil society of the Caribbean. We are so pleased to be followed online by the chair of the Committee on World Food Security, Her Excellency Ambassador Nsfofo Zele, to whom we extend a warm greeting. Today's webinar will start with welcome remarks by Ms. Renata Clark, FAO's Sub-Regional Coordinator for the Caribbean. These will be followed by a presentation by Mr. Franz Jean, Food Security Officer at the FAO Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, about the food security and nutritional situation in the region. Then Ms. Manuela Couvi, Legal Officer at the FAO's Development Law Service, will introduce the course. This presentation will be followed by remarks from several representatives from the Caribbean who will share practical experiences showing us how the human right to adequate food takes shape in different contexts. We will thus hear from representatives from CARICOM, Guyana, and Barbados. Finally, Ms. Daniela Godoy, Senior Policy Officer at the FAO's Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, will deliver some closing remarks. And so without further ado, I invite Ms. Renata Clark, Coordinator for FAO's Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, to give her welcome remarks. Ms. Clark, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nicholas. Real pleasure to be with you here with you this morning. The SDGs have been guiding the narrative in the international development community for almost the last decade. It's frustrating to see that over the last 4 years that we have moved off target, at least for SDG 2. And furthermore, that it is the Caribbean within the Latin America and the Caribbean region that is underperforming. We are seeing food insecurity at unprecedented levels. Food and nutrition security is a very complex construct. One of CARICOM's most strongly driven policy initiatives, the 25 by 25, is largely about food security. The experience of COVID and the recognition that supply chains could be compromised propelled governments into action to secure food supplies, even in an uncertain world. The 25 by 25 initiative aims at reducing reliance on food imports by increasing the availability and accessibility of food produced within the Caribbean region. But this is just one element of the food security safeguard. Healthy diets need to be affordable. So not only must we produce more food in the Caribbean, we must produce more efficiently and more sustainably. FAO is very much engaged in building capacities of farmers and national institutions to innovate, to apply best practices to enable greater efficiency and greater environmental sustainability, greater market competitiveness. We have seen the importance of well thought out social safety nets, particularly in a region such as ours that is prone to disasters. We have been working with the UN, particularly with the World Food Programme, as well as with other partners, on linking agriculture to social protection. All of these areas of work and many others contribute to building food and nutrition security. I was a much younger FAO staffer at headquarters when the discussions leading up to the 2004 adoption of the voluntary guidelines were ongoing. As is often the case, some countries viewed this with suspicion at first, but it seems now to be much more widely accepted. I look forward to hearing from our experts on how the application of these guidelines has progressed over the last 2 decades and what we have learned that can help countries to build on the protections for the vulnerable to enable everyone to have regular access to healthy diets in line with cultural traditions and to live with dignity. The right to food should not just be a vague notion of wishing well, nor a vague responsibility that is not really held by anyone. It will be particularly interesting to learn about progress in accountability frameworks, but also to enable each of us to understand our role in this essential commitment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your welcome remarks, Ms. Clark. I now invite our next speaker, Mr. Francen Jean, Food Security Officer at the FAO Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean, to present some highlights of the food security and nutrition situation in the Caribbean. This will allow us to understand the importance of guaranteeing the progressive enjoyment of the right to food in this region. Mr. Jean, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicolas. It is really a great pleasure being here in this very important webinar to talk a bit about some of the statistics and trends as it relates to food security and nutrition in the Caribbean. I would like to start with this message that Dr. Renata Clark kind of alluded to in her presentation earlier, where from the regional overview of food security and nutrition, it is indicated that the Latin America and the Caribbean region is among the few regions in the world where hunger has decreased in 2022. However, in the context of the Caribbean, what we have observed is that there has been an increase in both hunger and food insecurity. And also one message that was mentioned by Renata is that with the trends and with the statistics we are looking at, we are seeing, it is clearly indicated that the region as a whole is not on track when it comes to achieving the Sustainable Development Goal, which is about ending hunger, achieving food security, and improve nutrition and promoting sustainable agriculture. The report, the regional overview, has a total of 18 indicators. In this presentation, we will not go through all of them. What I'm doing is that I'm trying to pick 6 of them and go through them together with you, starting with the prevalence of hunger and undernourishment, where we have seen an increase in the Caribbean, moving from a 14.7% in 2021 to a 16.3% in 2022. It is an increase of approximately 2%. Important to highlight here is that in the English-speaking countries, generally speaking, there have been a low level of prevalence of undernourishment. Countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Barbados, Belize, Guyana, in 2022 have displayed a level below the 5% when it comes to prevalence of undernourishment. However, it is important to mention here that there are important pockets of undernourishment in almost all of the countries. Specifically, I would like to point out the case of Trinidad and Tobago, that has the highest prevalence of undernourishment among the English-speaking countries, with a 12.2% in 2022. In terms of the prevalence of moderate or severe food insecurity, what we have seen is that in the Caribbean, there have been an increase from 59.5% in 2021 to a 60.6% in 2022. Important to highlight here is the case of Bahamas that has the lowest with a 17.2%. However, the case of countries like Jamaica surprises many of us with a 54.4%. Almost one in every two persons in Jamaica would have some sort of uncertainty when it comes to accessing the amount and quality of food. And the third indicator I bring here is the case of overweight among children under 5 years of age. What we have seen is that the Caribbean has maintained a lower level when it comes to the proportion of children overweight, with a 6.6% in 2022. However, we have to mention here is the case of Barbados and Trinidad and Tobago that are among the top 4 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean region when it comes to overweight among children, with a 11.8% in the case of Barbados and a 13.9% in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. The fourth one I bring is the case of anemia among women and their reproductive age. The Caribbean has far higher level or prevalence of anemia, with almost 30%. And important to mention here is that is the case of Guyana, where we have noticed almost 1 in every 2 women in their reproductive age, and the case of Guyana would suffer some sort of anemia. And in terms of the last 2 indicators selected to present here, these are the cost of healthy diets and affordability of healthy diets. What we have noticed is that the Caribbean as a whole has the highest cost of healthy diets, moving from a 3.84 purchasing power parity dollars in 2017 to a 4.41 in 2021. Important to mention here are the case of countries like Jamaica, Grenada, and Suriname that have not only the highest cost of healthy diets in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also the highest in the globe, in the world. And in terms of affordability of healthy diets, again, what we have noticed is that the Caribbean as a whole has a twice higher of its population not having access to or under the risk of not having access to healthy diets, according to the data from the reports. And also important to mention here again is the case of Jamaica, where we have approximately 62.6% not having access, Belize 53%, and Suriname 58.6%. So those 3 countries are among the 4 countries in the region, Latin America and the Caribbean region, with the highest proportion of the population under the risk of not having access to a healthy diet. Also, the reports put out several drivers that may contribute to those numbers, to those trends, those statistics I just presented. And those include the case of the food systems of the Caribbean that is exposed to both economic and natural shocks. Important to mention here is the case of the fact that most countries in the region import most of the food consumed. Some of the countries would import almost 90% of the food consumed. And another important driver to mention here is the case of the high food prices and inflation that impact particularly the most vulnerable. And the third one is the climate variability and extreme that continues to hit several countries. In some cases, it drops. For instance, the case of countries like Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, and so on. And for other countries, it's heavy precipitations and flooding. And lastly, although there have not been, or there have been some sort of limited recent data, but insights from other countries in the region have suggested that there have been an important increase in terms of poverty, income inequality, and employment that may have also impacted those numbers, those statistics just presented. All right, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. John, for this important contextual and statistical information. We will now hear from Ms. Manuela Cuvey, Legal Officer at FAO's Development Law Service, who will introduce us to the course's platform, main content, objectives, and features, as well as introduce the content itself of the right to adequate food. Ms. Cuvey, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning to our Caribbean audience and a warm welcome to all the participants from around the world. We are very happy to have you here as we launch this course, which is the product of a lot of work and love, if I may say, put into this experience by colleagues from FAO Campus, from the Development Law Service, including Carolina Flores from RLC, and from all of FAO. So we're very happy to be here and to show you what this course is about, and hopefully to invite you to take it, to enroll in it, but also to share it with your networks. So I hope I'm sharing the screen okay. This is the presentation that I will do. The structure of the presentation is basically threefold. I'm going to talk about the course overview, as it was said, the objectives and what you can expect if you take this course. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the right to adequate food. So you have some elements coming out of this webinar, and also a quick overview of the platform and the main components. So why did we develop this course? As it was mentioned, and in a lovely remark also by Renata, our subregional coordinator, FAO has been working on this for a while already. There are many highlights. The 2004 adoption of the FAO voluntary guidelines is one of them. And this year, actually, the Committee on World Food Security is going to be having a session on this matter. And this is why we're also so happy to have Ambassador Nosipo Jesile, chair of the CFS, joining us today, as well as, of course, all of you. And these voluntary guidelines is one of the elements that FAO has taken and has been working with in order to implement this agenda. So we've been doing a lot in this area, but we always know that developing capacity is necessary. It's not only enough to have a right, you need to know the content of this right, you need to know how to make it concrete in action. And this is what we hope that the course will help you achieve, whether you are a government official, whether you are a member of civil society, whether you are a member of an indigenous peoples. We've heard of many people in the many trainings we do of people who work on these matters, but sometimes they come up to you and they say, I didn't know that this was a right. I was working on food. I was working on getting better seeds. I was working on getting recognition for the work that I do as a family farmer, or for the work that I do in my school through this school feeding program, but I didn't know that this was a right. So this is very important, and this is also why we developed this course. I want to mention that the course was first developed in Spanish 2 years ago, so it is also available in Spanish, and you can find it at the same FAO Campus platform. Now, these are the objectives and the learning outcomes that we expect in terms of presenting you with the main concepts of what the right to adequate food is and the applications in these countries. in countries. So we expect that by doing this, we will contribute to the dissemination of knowledge, which is something important and a first step in order to be able to exercise a right. We expect to raise awareness in terms of what this right means and what each person in society is expected to do in its regard. And we also expect that it can empower all members of society, that it can give the tools, additional tools, to people who are working in this area in order to make this right effective and achieve its progressive realization. Now, there are general features of this course that you can expect. It is a 10 hours self-paced course, which means that participants can follow the course at their own pace and asynchronously. The course is completely free. You just need to enroll in the platform, create your account, and then you can enroll. And upon completion, you can obtain a course certificate by passing a final evaluation. This is a multiple choice test. The scoring pass is 70%, and you will be able to obtain your certificate. What we tried to do in the course, trying to engage participants, was also to showcase experiences. And since we are the Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, this is where we work, and this is a course in English, we focus on experiences from the English-speaking Caribbean. So you will find not only the theory, the concepts, but you will find concrete experiences through videos of people who are working in different countries. So for example, you will hear experiences from Barbados, from civil society organizations. We will have one of them speaking to us later on. You will hear experiences about fisheries in Belize, school feeding in Guyana, climate change and food in Suriname. So this is our goal, to try to bring very concrete experiences to you, also as a source of inspiration to know what's happening in other countries. And of course, we would love to hear from you. If you have any other experiences that you want to share with us, this would be very, very useful to us. So please, if you have, as you follow us on YouTube or X, if you want to tell us about some of the experiences that you're engaged with, we would love to hear about them. So that's what you can expect from the course. Now, of course, we don't want you to leave this presentation without having at least a nutshell information on what the right to adequate food is. We can put it with our own words, as the right to adequate food is the right to feed oneself in dignity. But there is also a concept that you can read, that it's on the screen, and it talks about having regular, permanent, and unrestricted access, either directly, because, for example, you cultivate your own food, or by means of financial purchases, which means that you need to have an income, right? You need to have a job, you need to have an income, or if you don't, you need to have access to social protection or to programs that can help you in this regard, so that you can access food that is both of quality, so it's adequate in the sense that it's nutritious, that it's composed of what we call a healthy diet, but it's also, of course, in a quantity that is enough for you to have a dignified life. Now, it cannot be any food. It has to be food that corresponds to the cultural traditions of the people to which, that are the members of the society. And it has to ensure them of physical, mental, individual, and collective capacities, right? With an element of dignity. And this is also very important. It's common to all the human rights that people are entitled to. Now, where does this right to adequate food comes from? It comes from a number of declarations and treaties that our states members to FAO and to the United Nations have approved throughout the years. The first one was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, but from then on, there have been many treaties where this right has been recognized. Probably the most important is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, because that's where you can find it in Article 11. And the concept of the right to food that I just mentioned also comes from that article. But there are many other treaties concretely towards the rights of specific groups of people, such as women or children, where also you find this right. So This is to say that there is a variety of instruments of international obligations where this right comes from. And then there's also the Right to Food voluntary guidelines adopted in 2004, and that, as I mentioned, will be 20 years of its adoption this year, and FAO will be doing a number of events and reflections and moments to ask these questions as to whether, how far have we come since the adoption, how concrete is it, the implementation in the different countries. Now, this right has several components, and some of these components talk about the importance of having access, as I said, both economic and physical, that food should be available, that there should be stability between these components. Sustainability is also an important component. It's concerned with present and future generations. It's concerned with the way that we produce food, that it should be in balance with the environment, and also the element of adequacy, which I have already explained a bit. You can find much more concrete examples and experiences in the course. Now, I think it's also important to highlight that for us, we understand that the human right to adequate food is necessary as we work with a human rights-based approach. So in the UN, in FAO, the support and the technical cooperation that we give to countries, that we give to those who we work with, has a human rights-based approach. And the right to adequate food is one of these many human rights. And these human rights are interdependent, are indivisible. So for example, if we think about the rights of women, the rights of children, the rights of indigenous peoples, many other rights that you can think of, but the right of participation, transparency, so many elements have to be integrated as we work on these matters. But also when you think about a perspective that it's a human rights-based approach, you think about the each person as a subject of obligation, of rights, and the state as a subject of obligations. So the course will also explain what are those obligations. I think a lot of these fear or suspicion that arise when people are thinking about the right to adequate food has to do with whether the state has an obligation that is immediate and that it cannot be fulfilled, for example. If you take the course, you will understand that the duty of the state is to work towards a progressive realization of the right to food. This means that the states have to take steps that are progressive. It is not something that they have to do immediately. But it also means, and this is equally important, that once the state has implemented certain legislation or programs, it cannot go back. And so that's important in terms of understanding how this right works. What are the obligations of the states? Of course, it's a right like all the other rights that it cannot be, it has to be free from discrimination as it promotes inclusive societies. Once a program from a state, for example, is adopted to implement this right, it cannot discriminate against people. That's very important. It's at the core of a human rights-based approach. It implies also the applications of several principles. I have mentioned some. We call them Panther for the acronym because they talk about participation, transparency, rule of law, etc. So it is a way of looking at the state and the implementation of rights. And finally, it empowers people. Empowerment is a very important word when we think about human rights, and people need to be empowered when it comes to their own food needs and requirements. And this empowerment comes through the exercise of a right. When Jean was mentioning the numbers of food insecurity in the Caribbean, for example, it is important to distinguish what is a situation that can be measured. That is food security and nutrition. It's a situation, it's a fact. It's something that you can measure, as opposed and as distinct as to what is a right. Because when you have a right, you have, as I said, certain tools in order to make it effective, but also there's a state that has obligations. So this is an approach that is important and is distinct from what it means to have food security, because also you could have food security, but not necessarily your right is being effectively guaranteed. So these are all concepts and notions that we can explain better as you take this course. That is the page of the course. You can, once you enroll, you will see how you can navigate through it and you can have access to the content. Of course, it has also additional elements. You will find basically, and I'll focus on this, it has 7 parts where you will see a general introduction to human rights, which is necessary to have this conversation, then a focus on the right to adequate food, what it is, what are its components, all this development in international law. Then we'll discuss the obligations of states and the role of different actors, the right and its special protection in certain groups of people. We put the lens on certain groups of people, their particular situations. What are the means of protection and implementation? You know, I've mentioned the international law dimensions of this right, but in each country, countries, government authorities need to pass legislation and need to adopt programs in order to make this right effective. So this also has to do with how you implement and how you protect the right. And as I said, throughout the course, you will find different experiences through videos and through material to learn more about what is happening and its implementation. It's in the Caribbean. So I want to thank you all for your attention, for joining us. We hope that this has motivated you to take the course if you haven't already. And I hope that we can work together so that the right to food is known for all and guaranteed for us all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manuela. I'm certain that after this presentation, our audience will be enthusiastic to register for this online course and learn a lot more about its important human rights and the role that each of us can play in its attainment. And now, to get a more concrete perspective on how the right to adequate food takes shape in practice, 3 representatives from governmental and non-governmental stakeholders will share their experiences. I kindly remind our speakers that they each have 5 minutes. To begin, Ms. Milagro Matas, Deputy Program Manager of Agriculture and Agro-Industrial Development at the Caribbean Community Secretariat, will tell us about 2 key public policies adopted at the sub-regional level that contribute to the enjoyment of the right to adequate food. These are CARICOM's Regional Food Security and Nutritional Policy and the 25 by 2025 Import Substitution Program. Ms. Matas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, FAO, for the invitation to present the CARICOM policies and frameworks which promote the fulfillment of the right to adequate food. As you may be very aware, except for Belize and Guyana, the region is a net importer with at least 7 members importing more than 80% of the food they consume. To date, the region's annual food import bill is estimated at $6 billion with an estimated 3.7 million people out of 7.1 million in the English-speaking Caribbean being considered food insecure. The rising food prices, increasing inflation, and the effects of climate change compound the region's ability to swiftly bounce back. CARICOM's response to the food and nutrition challenges, however, have been resolute, commencing with the strong political will from regional heads of government to secure accessible, affordable, and sufficient healthy food for all in the region. In the year 2010, heads of government in the Lillandale Declaration committed to the development of a regional policy for food and nutrition security, which recognizes the principles of the right to food and agriculture and food production. The implementation of this policy, among other things, has resulted in the food and nutrition security item being recurrent on the agenda of quoted agriculture, quoted health, and the Conference of Heads of Government. This means that leaders at the highest decision-making level are being held accountable to implement strategic measures to address our current environment. Moreover, at the 32nd Conference of Heads of Government, the item entitled the CARICOM Agri-Food Systems Agenda, Prioritizing Regional Food and Nutrition Security, resulted in the establishment of the Special Ministerial Task Force on Food Production and Food Security, the MTF. The MTF is made up of ministers of agriculture who meet monthly to make important decisions and monitor actions necessary to achieve the transformation of the region's agri-food systems. In particular, the MTS focuses on implementing Vision 25 by 2025, the region's plan to reduce food imports by 25% by the year 2025. The initiative places priority on improving the areas of production and productivity, technology, technical capacity building along the value chain, research and development, climate smart adaptation, agriculture insurance and financing, animal health and food safety, increasing new investment, the participation of youth and women in agriculture, and facilitating market access and trade. Of course, partners in development like the FAO and private sector representatives are key contributors in these meetings, since the work requires the collective action of all to optimize progress. To date, member states have increased their budget allocations to agriculture. Agriculture investment portfolios have also expanded to also include sizable sustainable investments in the production of non-traditional markets, such as cover structures, aquaponics, and also in the areas where import replacement opportunities exist, such as poultry, small ruminants, eggs, grains, roots and tubers, fruits, and vegetables. Some of the most significant game-changing policy actions and strategies which have been achieved to date include SPS-related policies such as CARICOM trade policy for animals and animal products, the regional agricultural health and food safety policy, the alternate sanitary and phytosanitary dispute resolution mechanism, and the 19 guidelines for the trade in animal and plant commodities. The adoption of these will decrease technical barriers to trade and increase intra-regional trade, making healthy, safe food more accessible and more cost competitive for CARICOM's people. All in all, the region is committed both in political will and most importantly in action to transforming the regional agri-food system and securing food and nutrition. We thank the FAO for collaborating with CARICOM to increase efforts in guaranteeing the right to food and for giving us the opportunity to share the work being done. Thank you all for your attention.
No, thank you, Ms. Matas. And now we will hear about Guyana's efforts not only to enshrine the right to adequate food on its law books, but also provide for a governance mechanism to effectively enforce it. Moreover, once adopted, Guyana's Food Security and Nutrition Act would be the first of its kind in the English-speaking Caribbean. I leave you with Mr. Omadat Chandan, Legal Officer at the Ministry of Agriculture of Guyana, to tell us more about this initiative. Mr. Chandan?
Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. Just to start my presentation by saying that Guyana has a legislative framework as it every in Guyana has access to food and nutrition. Over the last few years, Guyana has been through a number of treaties, a number of conventions aimed at ensuring that there's respect, there's protection, there's full of the right to access adequate food. In addition, 41 provides for the right, and also in addition, there are enforcement mechanisms in place that will ensure that those rights. However, given those provisions, there are some challenges in the part. As we however just spoke, the increase in living and climate change, the high bill, and of course, the need for a well-defined institutional setting for food security. And of course, with that, if that is in place, the legislative framework. However, the government has taken a number of initiatives as it relates to food security. For example, this year we have the largest budget allocation as it relates to agriculture, as Guyana tries to mitigate the challenges as it relates to climate change, increased rainfall, droughts, and increasing sea levels. Sustainable agriculture is also being highlighted, and you know that and we're encouraging others to get on board to promote that approach. And to do that, we are also looking at climate smart agriculture. We're talking about drip irrigation, cultivation, crop rotation. It's also the new and innovative entrepreneurship program, which will see the construction of 300 shade houses around the country, which would enhance high quality crops here. The government has been vulnerable group. For example, as Manuel would have mentioned, our feeding program, we're hoping to expand that program, improve that program. That program is whereby all students in primary and nursery school is given a balanced diet on a daily basis. In addition, our Amerindian Act has been in place for some time, since 2006, where we're trying to preserve the way of life of our Amerindian people, our indigenous people, to ensure that their livelihood is being sustained. The Persons with Disabilities Act, we've also done some amendments to that act to ensure that persons with disabilities, they have access to water, access to housing, access to a number of benefits as it relates to food security. Public assistance is also an area that government would have targeted in terms of helping persons with HIV and those persons who cannot adequately maintain their households. But Guyana is still, and you heard Manuel mention it, in collaboration with the United Nations FAO, and we're very thankful to them. I must say heartfelt thanks to them. They're providing some funding for us to draft a new bill, the new food security bill, and in collaboration with the Ministry of Legal Affairs here in Guyana and the Ministry of Agriculture, we've already have a draft, and we're hoping probably within the first quarter of this year, food security bill will be completed and finalized. But I'll just go through quickly. The bill will focus on the components that Manuel mentioned. I'm not going to mention them again, but just a few. Food availability, access to food, food utilization, stability, and sustainability. Those are the guiding principles for the bill. Of course, we believe that there needs to be more investment, more innovation in agriculture to develop our sector. As you know, our agri sector has taken off in Guyana, just like our oil sector, but we're hoping that people will get that balance. We'll also be focusing on pregnant and lactating mothers as well as national support to children to ensure that there's enough plans there, enough programs to support our children. Of course, Manuel would have mentioned groups in vulnerable situations, and I would have mentioned before. And of course, we're hopeful that there's going to be a component in this bill also to reduce the food import bill. I think the figures are very large, but Guyana has taken some steps as it relates to our food import bill. For example, we've started the production of onions and spices. And of course, Guyana is committed to the CARICOM just now, 25 by 25 initiative, which aims to cut the extra regional food import bill by 25% by 2025. Also, the bill would establish new government structure, the Food Security and Nutrition Authority. Of course, we believe that it should be under one umbrella organization and everything as it relates to that. Importantly, the bill would also focus on gender equality and women empowerment, because of course in Ghana here about over 50% of our population are women. Of course, they are vulnerable as well. Importantly, this is my last point because I will take some time. The focus on food security emergencies or systems. The moment Guyana does not have any comprehensive emergency plan as it relates to the prevention of food insecurity during a crisis. So we're hopeful that this provides work so that when such events happen, we have something. Rural development is also important. Of course, 73% of our population live, and of course, are below the poverty line. So we're hopeful that the bill will create that framework to mitigate the effects of food insecurity. In close, I just want that this bill is a model bill for young brothers and sisters follows. So thank you so much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Channon. It really was a pleasure to hear from the direct experience of a governmental and legal organization in assuring this right. And now we will get the perspective of civil society and learn about the important role that they play in the fulfillment of the right to adequate food. Ms. Maisha Hutton, Executive Director of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, will share some of the main initiatives undertaken by this civil society organization. Ms. Hutton, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to the FAO for inviting the HCC to contribute to this important self-paced course on the right to adequate food. The HCC is the only alliance of civil society organizations focused on the prevention and control of NCDs in the Caribbean. Foundational to our work is the belief that all people have a fundamental right to the highest attainable standard of health, and the right to adequate nutritious food is essential for the fulfillment of this right. Overconsumption of ultra-processed products, or UPPs, high in sugars, sodium, and saturated fats, is the single greatest risk factor for overweight, obesity, and diet-related NCDs. The environments in which people are born, grow, and live are now carefully curated by commercial actors to drive excess consumption of these health-harming products. The reality is the healthy choice is often the most difficult and expensive choice. UPPs are ubiquitous. They are widely available, cheap, attractive, hyperpalatable, heavily marketed, and there is increasing research which supports the addictive nature of these products. Tackling the commercial determinants of obesity and NCDs, that is, the commercial activities which drive the consumption of these foods, requires strong regulation to reset and reshape our food systems such that they become the foundation of human and planetary health. Civil society has a critical role to play in advocating for evidence-informed, healthy food policies. The HCC and our member civil society organizations across the region have as our food policy priorities the introduction of high-end octagonal front-of-package nutrition warning labels to empower consumers to identify foods high in sugars, sodium, and saturated fats. Banning of the sale and marketing of UPPs in settings such as schools, regulating the marketing of UPPs to children more broadly, fiscal policies to make UPPs less affordable while increasing the affordability of healthy options, and the introduction of conflict of interest policies to protect public health from industry interference. Our advocacy in support of these policies cuts across the following key areas: coalition building, including the formation of an active regional childhood obesity prevention CSO action team. Capacity building through training, convening, development, and dissemination of tools such as model legislation for regulating the sale and marketing of healthy foods in school settings, and a recent policy brief to support equity and human rights considerations in NCD policymaking. Empowering future advocates through healthy Caribbean youth activities, including the development of publications such as Our Health, Our Rights, a rights-based childhood obesity prevention agenda. Building public awareness and demand for healthy food policies in collaboration with regional partners, including UNICEF, PAHO, CARFA, OECS Commission, UE, and FAO, using various strategies, including contributing to and disseminating research, working with the media, and through the implementation of a number of multi-partner regional digital campaigns, including Now More Than Ever, We Need to Protect Our Children, Make It Make Sense, Give Us Octagonal Warning Labels, and our current campaign, See the Truth. We're also committed to supporting the whole of government and whole of society food policy response through work with the public sector, including national NCD commissions, and collaborating with health promoting private sector actors. And finally, our work in accountability, which includes our Childhood Obesity Prevention Scorecard, which provides a snapshot of the implementation status of childhood obesity prevention policies and links to regulatory instruments. Advocating for the right to health and the right to adequate inclusion in the recent Barbados constitutional reform process. And our work in the area of commercial determinants of health, which includes tracking industry interference in marketing to children, monitoring of the recent front-of-package warning label standards process, and advocating for improved governance to safeguard policymaking through the development of tools which are tailored to the Caribbean setting and assist in the prevention, mitigation, and management of conflicts of interest. In closing, Caribbean civil society is committed to continuing to work with partners such as the FAO to ensure the fulfillment of the right of Caribbean people to adequate, nutritious food. We welcome and applaud this new FAO e-course as an important tool in building the capacity of key stakeholders, including civil society, to contribute to this critical agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hutton, from that perspective of the regional civil society, that important perspective. We actually have a few questions from the live stream chat. So I will ask these questions, well, primarily just one, and we invite any member from the panel who would like to respond to do so. The question is, you have mentioned in your presentations that each of us has an important role to play in the fulfillment of the right to food. This role seems clear in the case of governments or international institutions, but how can individuals such as parents, teachers, and farmers contribute to this? And can you give us some concrete examples? Panelists? Maisha, I think you're actually you're warming up to answer, and I think you're very well positioned to respond. So we're eager to hear from you.
Thank you. Civil society is all about deepening and engaging the democratic process and including and involving people on the ground to build a kind of groundswell of support for the types of policies that I just mentioned. And there's a role to play at the community level of individuals, parents, teachers, to support the kinds of campaigns that I just referred to. So whether we're talking about in Barbados, the Barbados School Nutrition Policy, a significant amount of advocacy is being spearheaded by the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, and they're reaching out to parents and students alike to support that work and really get on board with the policy. This type of public engagement is also happening in Jamaica through the Heart Foundation of Jamaica and the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network. And they're reaching out to their constituents, which include individuals, to come out and support activities which lead to greater engagement and support and create that environment which allows policymakers to move ahead with the implementation of these policies, which then impact the population level by creating these environments which allow people to have access to healthier foods through a number of different policy actions. So there's definitely an important role for individuals to play.
Thank you so very much for that.
Yes, and just to add to that, Nicholas, is that our new food security bill will be focusing on more on a regional level as well. So there be stakeholder involvement. As we put together this bill, we'll be having consultations in the bill as well. So there'll be a part for those farmers, I already mentioned farmers, to play a part. And in the bill itself, there's a forum for food security that would meet every yearly, I believe, they will be meeting. So they'll have their say, so to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chan, and that's very good and very progressive news. As Ms. Manuela said, the issue is not one turn at a point, but progressively ensuring that right. I'll just ask my colleagues if we have time for the very last question, or that's it. That's it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And with that, thank you. We will now turn to Ms. Daniela Godoy, Senior Policy Officer at the FAO Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean, who will give some final remarks. Ms. Godoy?
Thank you, Nicolas. I would like to start saying thank you to all of the representatives from governments, civil society organizations, academia, the private sector, and colleagues from FAO, and women and men from different backgrounds who attend today. My name is Daniela Godoy, and I would like to highlight and start saying that guaranteeing the right to adequate food is crucial to eradicate hunger and achieve food security and nutrition in Latin America and the Caribbean. FAO, as the specialist agency of the United Nations mandate with the achievement of food security and nutrition, has historically supported member states' involvement of sustainable and resilient agriculture for food security and nutrition and of the right to adequate food. FAO's work is grounded in the human rights-based approach where people are active participants in the process of human development. One key item is FIO story was the adoption of the right to food voluntary guidelines in 2004. This year marks its 20th anniversary, and in the upcoming 52nd session of the Committee of Food Security will have a global thematic event on the right to food guidelines to commemorate this. We invited you to follow this event and other activities happening in the context of the anniversary. In addition, FIO follows with adaptation initiatives such as the CELAC Food Security and Nutrition Plans 2030 updating, leading by the PTP CELAC of San Vicente and Grenadines. This serves as the regional roadmap for 33 CELAC member states and presents an updating version of the CELAC Food Security and Nutrition Plan 2025. Regarding our panelists, I would like to highlight, first of all, that Renata Clark opened this webinar by providing us with a comprehensive panorama of the current state of food security and nutrition in the Caribbean. Their insights delve into specific experience, shedding light on the primary concerns to the Caribbean regions faces in the realm of sustainable agriculture for food security and nutrition. After this, we got a more concrete image of these challenges. As my colleague, Mr. Francis Yen, mentioned, the latest estimates of food security and nutrition in Latin America and the Caribbean showed that in 2022, 43 million people suffer hunger in the region, 7 million in the Caribbean. Also, 247 million people being affected by moderate or severe food insecurity. 26 of them million live in the Caribbean, are living in the Caribbean. Regarding nutrition indicators, in 2022, 4.2 million children under the age of 5 were overweight in Latin America and the Caribbean. In contrast, stunting in 2022, in the same year, affect 5 million children under the age of 5. I would like to highlight the main points mentioned by other panelists today in the webinar to introduce you the course Adequate Food, the Human Right of Us All, English version. Manuela Cubi, with meticulous detail, provide a comprehensive overview of the self-paced course of the right to adequate food, unveiling its potential and catalyzed it for empowerment across diverse sectors, especially the civil society. Milagro Matus from CARICOM highlighted the challenges of food security and nutrition in the region within the context of the climate change and inflation, among other drivers. She also elaborated in the region's plan, CARICOM 25 by 25 initiative, aimed at addressing the region's rising food import bill, improving regional trade, and creating wealth and economic opportunity for every CARICOM member state. While Dr. Omar Chadan outlined Guyana's concerted efforts, such as safeguarding the right to adequate food for children and people with disability, and contributing to the reduction of the food import bill. Notably, he spotlighted the groundbreaking food security and nutrition and the right to adequate food bill currently under development with the invaluable support of FIO. Lastly, Maisha Hatton shed light of impactful civil society initiatives and the crucial role of the Healthy Caribbean Coalition in combating non-communicable diseases, advocating for the consumption of the healthy diet to improve the inclusion of the right to adequate foods in Barbados and other countries. Together, these narratives underscored not only the complexity of the challenges we face, but also the collective responsibility we share in crafting policies that safeguard and promote food security and nutrition, transforming our joint commitment to realize the human right to adequate food. I encourage you to seize this opportunity to become a protagonist in the fulfillment of the right to adequate food for everyone. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Godoy, for those summative remarks. and we would like to thank our speakers from the Caribbean and our FAO colleagues at the Development Law Service for their work, specifically helping to raise the consciousness of this right within the English-speaking Caribbean. We would also like to thank our audience for their attention and their comments on social media. I'm also happy to announce that we have over 165 people connected to this event on our platforms such as YouTube and X, and we extend to each of them a warm thank you for your company. And of course, we cannot conclude this webinar without reiterating the invitation to register for the online course, Adequate Food, the Human Right of Us All, where you can get a deeper understanding of the concepts that we have discussed today. Thank you to everybody, and do enjoy the rest of the day.